Greetings, y'all. Root Doctress here, and today we're dispelling the illusions of grandeur. Time to break the glass ceiling, break the tile floors, and get into it. Let's get it. A lot of us look at USA maps like the bottom right corner. The black outline shows how we perceive what the world map looks like, and the green are the actual size ratios of the world. As you see, the USA is portrayed to be big and bad when really, look at that size of Africa. It takes over almost South America and Central and, mid US combined. And that's the illusion of grandeur that we have. And then you look on the top right and you see the size of the US mass compared to other land masses. On your top left, this is what some would say a flat earther's map. But this is a map of the world beyond. This is a map of what exists outside of Antarctica or what is hidden that we don't have access to on this plane. The bottom left, let's see. You have Greenland portrayed to be humongous. And then you bring it down in purple over the United States, and it's not as big as it seems at all. Then you bring it even lower to South America, and it gets even smaller. And then you have the eyeball diagram in the middle. And it basically shows how your eye receives light waves, but your brain is the one that actually has vision. It's the one that perceives. And during all of this flipping of images, a lot can be lost in translation. And depending on your environment, depending on your knowledge of self, depending on how awakened you are to patterns and frequencies of this world, you are literally not seeing the world for all the frequencies it can provide. You are living in a haze, in a cloud, and really hypnotized. Watching TV affects the way you view things. Your nutrition affects the way you perceive things. There's so many different elements that come together to provide a clear view of life in the physical, spiritual, and immanent sense. All right, then we come to the next slide, and I share a dream about how the world was flipped upside down. Went outside, going under legs of someone swinging. The globe did a 180. The sky is upside down. Land patches are in the sky, but somehow worldly things were still below. And to me, this dream is showing the density of people. The lower the vibration, the more density the being, the thing has. And people that are not raising their frequency and their vibration are being left to sonder at the bottom, while others are being lifted into the light and pulled into the great beyond, the great darkness. And then you can read further to see the other parts of the dream. And then to the right, you have the Pac-Man with the angles, and it looks like a white triangle is in the middle, but really that's an illusion of our perception. There really isn't a white triangle, but from our previous notions of a similar imagery, we think that there's a white triangle there, and this just shows how the mind plays games on you. But if you don't know thyself and you don't see the grand design in this life, you will mistake that white triangle time and time again, and you won't see the black Pac-Mans and the angles within. You will see the white triangle. So it's really about breaking down the reality of I. Now, I'm going to take a risk, and hopefully y'all don't be flagged. I'm going to start off talking about there's a big bad protein gene in the air, y'all. And here on the CDC website, epigenetics, let's get into it. DNA can change. But they also say on the CDC website that it can be changed back. And if you just search on this website for epigenetics, you can scroll down and they start talking about RNA. And RNA is a main counterpart in that big bad jab that they're putting into your bloodstream, okay? And then on the right, you have an example of a study of how PTSD and other traumas can possibly affect people down the the bloodline. It can be carried in the DNA, meaning your grandmother, your great-grandmother, your great-grandfather, your parents, what they have gone through and how it alters their DNA will affect their offspring through birth. And that's not only about emotional trauma, but it's about toxins in their environment. It's about food that affects their DNA. It's about, hell, your thoughts affect your DNA. So really, like, when you're planting that seed, you really want the soil to be strong because it would affect our lineages going down the line. And if we're not doing the work to repair the DNA, we're going to keep seeding. We're going to keep seeding these low vibrational beings and dealing with the same secular problems that we're dealing with these young kids who don't have knowledge of self, who are being born with this transgenerational trauma in their DNA and not being healed from it. And then they go out to the environment and they act on this multi-generational cursed DNA, honestly. So it's time for us to raise up the vibration, family. Now, environment has been mentioned quite a few times, and I have an older video on my page talking about how where you live affects how you are, and to be wary of the architects of your environment, and to really look up who shapes your city, who did the city planning, and do they align with the same agenda to be the greatest self that you need to be. Here on the bottom, we have Benjamin Banneker, who was a nobleman, who was the architect of DC. And then on the top, you have an article from the Washington Post, I believe, about the Masonic history of the planning of the United States. Here, I have two YouTube channels, 432 Drop and the History Channel. 432 Drop is a great resource to find the ancient lineages of Black and brown people in the Americas and how the architecture and layouts of the Americas are aligned with ancient texts. We're talking Prester John, we're talking about Egyptian relics, we're talking about Buddha, we're talking about the Mongols, we're talking about the Olmecs, and how this land might have been the first great source and then recreated in Egypt and other places that these other monoliths exist. It isn't coincidence that the Great Awakening of most people start with a change in diet. That's because they're usually releasing built up toxin in their colons, in their kidneys, in their liver. And with this dispel, the evil is releasing too, quite honestly. And their brain and senses are able to function better and really perceive greater notions of what life is. And not only with that, just in a literal sense, when you're researching how to have a better diet, you would usually come across other resources like metaphysics, yoga, planetary energies, star seeds, indigo. You start going into a deeper hole. And I would say the first step to a greater awakening is managing your diet and starting with a detox. Quite honestly, I've been studying this since I was 16, so that'll be 10 years now, and I'm over talking about this shit, really, but it's almost getting annoying, the complacency and the blindness that I'm coming to, but I'm also seeing a huge turn and upliftment of the consciousness of people, so I just wanted to put out a little starter pack for you all. And once we're talking about perception, you might say, well, who are we being awakened to? Who has put the veil on us? And here I have the history of NASA, which was started by Nazis. America recruited Nazis to come in and start NASA. And then I have how LSD is a man-made drug, well, not even man-made, but also government-made drug, and how it was used to control during the 70s hippie movement. And then I also have MK Ultra and the Third Eye Spy movement, because not only about it being political and economical, there's a whole spiritual war going on. And I'm not going to dive deep into that, but I highly suggest you start with MK Ultra, and then it will probably lead you beyond, the great beyond. And then it's like, well, where do we go from here? Well, from here, we're dealing with deep fakes. We're dealing with green screens. We're dealing with AI. We're dealing with AI prediction algorithms. We're dealing with quantum computing. And all this is mimic off of the human design and the galaxy design. So I would say your best protection and your best line of defense and the things that you need to get in order before the access is taken over is a connection with your ancestors, ancestor venerations. If you have them, connection with your spirit guides, and start off trying to dream. Because the astral is where the real life is, where I'm trying to tell you where the real things are going on. And it's definitely being hijacked. I can tell it in my dreams. I know it sounds crazy, but like I said, it's a spiritual war. And the more that they're developing these deep fakes, AI, metaverses, they are really getting in tune with control over the astral realm. And I've been an astral traveler for over 10 years. I've been to the Akashic Records. I've quantum jumped. I've time traveled. I've had ancestor visitations. I've had prophetic dreams, all of that shit. And what I'm really noticing is it being hijacked with agents. And if you don't already have that connection, if you don't already know better, by the time you get there, you will be in the dream within the dream.